Thank you, sir. We'll give everybody a couple more minutes to drift in. I do see you, Tim. Robbie, I'm trying to promote you over there too. And there's Margarita.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to try to run this all by myself today. So Mo has been pulled away to legislative session and is kind of wrapped up in that and his new role too. So he's taken off the training wheels and told me just to run with it. So we're going to do that. We still have a few tech members that may pop in. We are recording and this will be posted on the State Housing Board Technical Advisory Committee website when we're all said and done today. Hope everybody had a great holiday break. We've got a lot of work to do in front of us and we are going to jump right into it. Let's just go around real quick and do some quick introductions again. But I think, well, actually, I think everybody knows everybody. I don't see any new people on this, so we're just going to skip that and go straight into everything that we have to get done today. I'll share my screen in a minute with the PowerPoint. I hope everybody got the email that ended up being 3 pages long. Sorry about that, but I wanted to make sure that we had everything out there. And the draft documents, I hope you had a chance to take a look at that. Most of that information is also on the PowerPoint, and we'll go through that. We technically start at 8:30. We hope to be done by 11:30. We can go as late as 12. I cannot probably go that long without a bio break. I am on my first half a pot of coffee. So we may take a break and let everybody get started on the rest of their coffee about 10 o'clock or so. We'll just see how that runs. So with that said, I think I've got all my panelists or tech members promoted to panelist attendees. If you want to say something, raise your hand. I'm watching the chat and I'll try to get to you as soon as I can when we go through here. By the time I allow you all to talk, you should be, there's only 4 non-TAC members currently on, and that's Eric and Robin and Byron and Byron Fears and Mr. Wiseman. What's your first name again? Here, I'll just allow you to talk.
Brad Wiseman.
Thank you. All right, and as far as other rules of the road here, probably put your cell phones on mute. That would help us from any distractions. And then once you speak, or raise your hand to speak, and put your hand back down. If anybody's having technical difficulty, we'll try to work through that too. So I'm going to share my screen and jump into it. Now, once I share my screen, I lose everybody on the video panel. So if the only way I'll see you is it doesn't help me if you wave your hand. You're going to have to either speak or go into chat. All right, can everybody see the screen okay? I'll assume so. Thank you, Robin. Well, guess what? I did half an hour of testing. There we go. In order to get the PowerPoint up. So introductions, we're going to skip that. We don't have a lot of new people or any new people today. Going to talk a little bit about some of those guidelines, overview, and scope. And then we're going to run through the draft changes to those administrative rules affecting tiny homes. We're going to revisit the schedule. I'm not saying we're going to have any changes to that schedule, but we're about one meeting behind and we need to catch up. And then we're going to wrap up and see if we have any action items or any to-dos to do that. So we had several comments back from TAC members and members of the public, as well as internally on staff, to really scope this out. And we appreciate everybody that wants to jump in and listen. And we have, we've had a few new people in the past. Let me jump over and give folks some permissions. Okay. And so in order to keep us on track and maybe educate the new people, you'll see this slide every time we go forward. I'm just going to run through it real quickly, and then we'll have the baseline for moving forward. First of all, we've got a big job to get done in a tough schedule. Everybody knows that. Priority time. And this is where we can't start at square one in each meeting. And that's the controlling statute. That's Colorado Revised Statute 2432, 3301 through 3329. The tiny home bill is passed, which is HB 221242, which modifies that controlling statute. And then all those changes have already been made into the statute. So if you go to statute now and look at it, it incorporates everything that it was in the tiny home bill. But the tiny home bill itself outlines those changes between the last issue of the statute and the current issue of the statute. And the administrative rules, that's 1302-14. That's the administrative rules that we're working on today, and it covers all aspects of building codes and standards and this legislation. So what you will see in that is you will see in the administrative rules definitions that haven't been made in statute. And legal has advised us not to repeat definitions in there. And I'll talk about a little bit about that when we get to the definitions page. But to really understand the program, you've got to read the administrative rules and the controlling statute at the same time. And then the previous meetings, TAC meetings, are on the website, the video recordings. All right, I stopped sharing for a second. I'm trying to get my screen to advance. Is those screens advancing okay for you guys? I can see you now, so nod your head up or down. All right. Let me go back to share screen. All right, do you guys see the screen, the slide that says guidelines, new scope, number 4 through number 9? Somebody can unmute and speak.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Yep, we see it.
Thanks, guys. Now, I have pretty good internet out here where I'm at, but every now and then it burps for a second or two. So if I lose you, then I'll probably be right back. But I might occasionally ask just for a radio check just to make sure you guys are there. In this, the TAC is only addressing tiny homes as defined by statute. And I know that we had some discussions on overall industry concerns, and that's fine. Those were good discussions and helped give us a good baseline. But that's not what we're here about here today. What we're here about today is only addressing the rules, administrative rules for tiny homes as defined by the statutes, not the RV models, the park models, tiny homes without wheels, et cetera, or tiny houses. We're only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules. We're only addressing foundations for those local jurisdictions that do not have a building department. And that's called out in statute. We'll follow the guidance language provided in the bill regarding different codes, small production concerns, affordability, et cetera. But just to share with you, plan review fees, inspection fees, and registration expenses are necessary because legislature did not appropriate those expenses for the program. Regarding different codes and standards, we can point to Administrative Rule 215. That allows alternatives to be considered at any point in time. That rule has always been in there. That rule will continue to be in there, although we may have to renumber. We'll see how that goes. But that rule is in there, and we're not considering changes to that rule. And then to keep us moving, and Robin has already started doing this for me, is provide comments in the form which can be easily adopted into the rules. Tim got kicked out as panelist. Let's see. All right, Tim, you should be able to get back in. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions or concerns? Happy to spend a couple minutes discussing that if anybody wants to. Seeing none. We'll go back to it. All right, so this is just a little overview on the how the administrative rules are set up. There's 7 rules that we deal with. Rule 1 is definitions. Rule 2 is the codes and the standards. Rule 3 is the fees. Rule 4 is the factory-built residential structures, modular and non-residential structures, commercial requirements. Rule 5 deals with sellers. And Rule 6, installations. And Rule 7 is the enforcement. Okay? Nothing you guys don't know. So here's some of the draft changes. And again, if you have that Word document, it might be easier to follow along here, but I think I've got everything over here. So we need to add, in my opinion, add a couple definitions to the rules. One is vehicle chassis. And that means the base frame of a single family dwelling designed and constructed for long-term occupancy that supports the home's construction and transportation, includes axles, wheels, gross vehicle weight rating, and a VIN number. And the other was add factory built, means the construction of a non-residential structure. Factory built residential structures for example, commercial or industrial or residential structures, modular homes, tiny homes, or multifamily structures that occurs in an off-site location. For example, manufacturing plant, small business space, or school workshop. Even a private barn is going to be considered a factory under here, separate from the site where the structure is to be installed. Any questions or concerns on those two? Okay. Here's where we get, I got some feedback on how to handle the whole trailer thing. And that's why we defined vehicle chassis up above. And then we added definition C, built for purpose trailer. It means a vehicle trailer that is built to serve as a construction platform for a tiny home and has engineered stamped drawings of van and gross vehicle weight and is capable of sustaining and moving a tiny home. A little bit later, we'll talk a little bit about the foundations. We'll talk a little bit about the installation requirements. The other piece of that is, but this kind of gives us that base. The other definition that I wanted to add, or we heard feedback on adding, was since we're going to go ahead and go with Appendix Q and modify into that Appendix Q almost everything out of AQ, is that tiny house is actually defined in Appendix Q. And so I thought it'd be worthwhile to have it in Rule 1 as part of our definition. Add tiny house means the definition of a tiny house is stated in IRC 2018 Appendix Q. A dwelling is 400 square feet, 37 meters squared or less in floor area, excluding lofts. A tiny house will be installed on a permanent foundation. A tiny house is distinct from a tiny home, which is defined by Colorado Revised Statute 2432, 3302, 35. Defines permanent foundation and temporary foundation. I'm deleting those out of Rule 1. Any questions or concerns on that?
Rule C, you say engineered stamp drawings. Is that for the transportation or is that for the on-site condition?
That's for the trailer. My thought there was that it's for the trailer itself, the chassis. Because that needs to come, those engineered stamp drawings need to come over with the construction plans.
Well, if it's for during transportation, engineers don't normally seal the trailer for transportation purposes. I check the chassis when we're putting it on blocks or supporting it by a foundation, but nobody seals trailers for transportation.
So, okay, then I thought they used engineered stamp drawings to come up with gross vehicle weight rating.
No, if you request any kind of seal drawing, Lippert is a huge trailer manufacturer, and it's pulling teeth trying to get anything technical from them.
So they won't give you a copy of the drawings?
They'll give you a copy of the drawings, but they're not sealed. There's no engineering behind them, I don't think. I mean, there might be experience and whatever.
Well, no, this is the exact discussion we need to have. So, so if we don't get engineered stamp drawings, then do we just change that to construction drawings?
I mean, you can define it so that, yeah, you're going to check the frame once you know how you're going to support it. Whether it's on a stem wall or you're supporting it on pier blocks or whatever, I check that and that's what gets sealed. So eventually the frame does get sealed, but it's for the on-site condition, not anything prior to being set on foundation.
Okay. Anybody else, any of our other folks that are building tiny homes have any suggestions or changes? What I'm hearing is that we need to drop engineer stamp drawings.
Or, you know, redefine it so that it's engineered sealed drawings.
Oh, look, everybody has their hand up. Sorry, guys, I just jumped back to that screen. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, two questions. I had one initially, and then I've got really another one based on the previous, just the recent comments from manufacturer. So my first comment, and we may get to this later in getting into the details for how the plan reviews are done then from your office of the checking the, you know, with your definition, the VIN and the gross vehicle weight and the language of capable of sustaining. So I assume that would be part of the plan check or third-party inspection if it's not, how that's done. So that's one question. And then the other part is, we're talking about the feedback I just heard was it's the chassis is checked and then the engineering is done. But previously I had not heard that the manufacturers were doing stamped engineered drawings of their structures, which are included, you know, the chassis would be included. So hopefully I phrased those two questions.
All right, thanks, Tim. So, and it might be my misconception in that there's an agency that certifies gross vehicle weights and assigns VIN numbers for trailers. And maybe they're the ones that are looking at the engineer stamp drawings, and we don't have that, and we just assume that the GVWR is approved.
I don't think that there are any stamped drawings, whether they're shared or not. I just don't think they exist.
Okay,
If you go to like a semi trailer, those don't have engineered drawings. Those aren't even engineered, but they have a GVWR and a VIN number.
okay. And then the other piece of that is that, and I'll catch everybody with their hands up. The other piece of that was, how do we handle what we would consider structural modifications to a trailer? If it's not a built for purpose trailer, somebody buys a used trailer, modifies, not strong enough to hold a tiny home, add some structure to it. How do we then know that it's going to have to get a new GVWR? And that's, so then it's a modified trailer, right? And so how do we, if it's a built for purpose trailer, I see it as an easier path. If it's a modified trailer, it's going to take a little extra effort. And I'm just going to go around the room now. Sean, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, to me, I believe all trailers are governed by DOT, mostly. They've got to be something that's approved to go over the road. And so there's got to be some kind of an approval process that comes in with that. Semi-trailers, again, they may, I don't know if they, I'm sure the manufacturer of semi-trailers does have some kind of engineered designs that they create when they build these things. I know on the HUD and the IRC side of things, again, the transportation platforms are designed in through either the DAPIA layout or the manufacturer, I'm assuming, again, has some kind of guidelines to get them over the state highways. I don't know what they are specifically, but I would think I would lean on DOT guidelines, if nothing else, to me.
Yeah, there is a process even in the state of Colorado for a modified trailer to get that. It requires, and I don't have it in front of me, but it requires several steps, including, I believe, inspection by Colorado Highway Patrol to make sure it's roadworthy. Margarita?
I was looking for the unmute button. Yeah, again, the chassis, it's a different thing, but well, can be done is the stamp drawings for the framing, the roof, and the attachment of all that upper structure to the chassis. I don't know if that's something that the industry would like to go through, because that can increase costs for manufacturing. So it's like a regular house, it's just done offsite, but a regular house has that set of drawings stamped. So it's maybe that where we are going instead of the chassis. Definitely we cannot stamp the chassis per se.
Well, and it's a really good comment, and it made me think that what I don't want to have to do is set up a standard for a tiny home trailer. I'd rather default to DOT or ASTM or whatever group takes care of those trailers. But the modified trailers, we may have to have some. What do we consider a built for purpose trailer? Is it, a 2x6 steel with cross members every X inches that are 2x3 steel, or what that looks like? And I'm not sure where we want to go on that, but good comment. Robin?
Yeah, I spoke with, in fact, one of them last night for about an hour on our podcast, trailer manufacturers, and asked if they have their trailers engineered, and they do not. They know what to build, I guess, for purpose and that kind of thing. I just wanted to mention that in the park model standard, ANSI 119.5, there is a prescriptive design for the 400 square foot that they will go up to. And then they have an exception. No one builds to that prescriptive model, just so you know, none of the tiny house, but they do have an exception or equivalent. So they spell out an 8-inch I-beam, 6 pounds per foot, and they spell out the cross members and the outriggers in that, in case you wanted to refer to something that is already written.
Okay. And I'm getting notices that my internet connection is unstable. I apologize. Robin, that was good. Byron?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I have purchased or had built nearly 100 trailers. I buy almost all my trailers from TrailerMade. I have never, allegedly they are engineered. I have never seen a document to prove so. I've never seen a document to prove so from any trailer manufacturer I've purchased from. I've had numerous trailers that I had constructed by welding shops, and I've had the state department or the highway patrol inspect them. It is nothing that guarantees anything is structurally sound. It has lights, it has an axle that supports the weight it's supposed to support, and it has chains and brakes. There's no engineering that comes into play whatsoever when the state inspects. So there's some real-time information for you.
That's good, Byron. I'm glad you threw that out there. I wasn't quite sure how in depth they actually went into determining, a new gross vehicle weight rating, or if they even cared at all for that.
Sam?
Yes.
They do care about the weight. Your axle has to be rated for the weight slip that you bring to them, because you get a trailer weighed and they see that it's a certified weight. And if your axle is an axle that is strong enough for it and still leaves some room for some payload, they are not concerned beyond that.
All right. So it's the axle that they're looking at and not the framing.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm sure they've got some engineer or somebody doing some kind of calculation that puts the center of gravity a certain distance away from the axles, trying to keep the tongue and axle weights enough that the truck can handle the tongue weight.
That would be a good question for the industry guys, I guess. And that is, do you guys design, when you design a tiny home, do you design it to be 60% forward and 40% back, center line, or is, I mean, that's what my U-Haul trailers say, right?
I would
Anybody.
answer that and say that with modular buildings, you're not going to have the weight. A lot of your trailers are rated for 60,000 pounds. There's no way that your home's going to weigh 60,000 pounds. So
Okay.
that probably doesn't come into play that much.
Robin, is your hand still up, or did you?
Yeah, I wanted to weigh in on the couple of things here, but mainly 60/40 is the industry standard from what I have heard. However, the trailer manufacturer really doesn't know how the manufacturer of the home is going to build. And if they put a loft and a bathroom and a kitchen, say on the back, it should be 60/40 weight, not 60/40 in distance, but they normally build them in 60/40 distance. And what I recommend whenever I have a talk to people in the tiny house industry is, if you're going to have it weighted one way or another, then you let your manufacturer know that, and he can adjust the center of gravity so that you do get the 60/40 weight. And what happens with that, though, it probably wouldn't concern you guys, but it's just, it may fishtail, it may be difficult to drive and transport. But once it's on site, that really doesn't matter. What really matters is that you have enough supports and hold downs to carry it. I mean, when you're driving it, you have 3 points. You have the axle, you have each side of the axles, and you have your tongue. And so everything is supported at 3 points. When you put it on site, you may have 4 or 5 piers on each side. And so there's a lot more support underneath of it when it is installed. So anyway, that's my comment there.
Right. And so, Robin, I in the back of my mind, I keep thinking about the mobility of these things and want to ensure that we have a unit that is built soundly, and if it's built in Colorado and traveling someplace else, that it is capable of handling that load. Sean?
One thing I do want to jump in there, Sam, and respond to that. Normally, either you're towing it, the manufacturer's towing it himself with insurance, or you get a transporter to tow it. And I have seen some tiny houses where they had to put bags of concrete in the front of the tiny house in order to give enough tongue weight for it not to fishtail. But that can happen, and it tows fine with the extra weight on it, and with sway bars and things like that. But yeah, it is a concern, but I think as far as it's more of a concern for DOT and transporting than it would be for setting up on site.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
Yeah, my question's more for the industry. Since the chassis is basically a main structural member of the whole structure, does the tiny home manufacturer warranty the chassis, or do they look to the I mean, one of my just questions is, it seems like these made for ready trailers are not made specifically for any weight loads or distribution or anything like that. So somebody, if the consumer buys something, it should be, I guess, guaranteed by the tiny home manufacturer, since I don't know if the trailer manufacturer is going to back up any kind of warranty. I'm just really curious.
So that's a really good question. I'm going to let Tracy or Byron answer that real quick.
This
So-
is Byron. Oh, there's Tracy. She knows more.
So I will say this: when you work with a trailer manufacturer that manufactures tiny house trailers, they will warranty their own trailer, right? Like, it's the same thing when you go and you buy a brand new house. you know, the builder's not warranting the refrigerator, the manufacturer of the refrigerator is warranting the refrigerator. So it's the same thing with the chassis. For example, TrailerMade is one of the TrailerMade or one of the trailer companies out there. I'm not aware of any other trailer manufacturers that offer a lifetime manufacturer's warranty. I do know that TrailerMade offers a lifetime manufacturer's warranty, but what that means is they are warranting their workmanship. So for example, if they're using Dexter or Lippert axles, they don't warranty the axles that they're using because they have their own warranty. They warranty their workmanship, which is their weld, if that makes sense.
And that makes sense, Tracy. And you jumped in a little late. We're looking at taking out on definitions on my list under built for purpose trailer, taking out engineer and stamp drawings because apparently those don't come with the built for purpose trailer. Nate, you've had your hand up for a while.
Hey, Sam, some do have engineered stamped drawings.
Do they? Do you get that from TrailerMade?
Yeah.
Buy? Okay.
Yeah, so not all, so here's what it is, right? When, for example, when the trailer companies went out there, I know that when TrailerMade, you know, decided to engineer all their trailers, they hired an engineer. He did come in and stamp, but because they offer so many combinations of trailers, they didn't have him stamp 100 different trailers. Okay, so what they did is they used the same methodology. So can I give you, for example, a tiny house trailer that Austin's building on right now here in Colorado Springs that has an engineering stamp on it? Yes, I can. Will every single trailer have a stamp on it? Maybe not, but one can be obtained.
Tim?
So, yeah, so my comment and really question was, you know, how does the RV industry, you know, structurally manage their trailer designs? Again, I don't know if they're engineered, but obviously they've figured it out from the standpoint of, you know, they're not going to fishtail, they're not going to, you know, whatever, you know, from a design standpoint. And then the other thing, like, you know, if we are talking about engineered design for a trailer standalone is a whole lot different than engineered design for a trailer with a structure on top of it. And I think that's what Sam's kind of getting at, is that, you know, if you load up this front of this thing with granite countertops and all the weight in the world, it's might not be meant for it. And how do we figure that out? Because we can't just say, oh, well, we all look at that and we make sure it works. That's not a definable process. And so I feel like there has to be some sort of, and it's not just the trailer, it's the trailer with what you're going to put on top of it that needs to be looked at from a structural standpoint. You know, the 60,000 pound trailer, somebody commented a minute ago, you guys don't have 60,000 pound trailers. 60,000 pound trailer has 12 tires. Those are 3 dually axle trailers. And I just haven't seen a tiny home that large. And so I don't know. I would be curious to know how the RV world handles the structural design of trailers. So that's my 2 comments.
Thanks, Nate. Lots of hands going up. Byron, I'm going to take you and then I'll run through the others.
Okay, thank you. To answer Sean's question about warranties, I have a building contract with each of the customers we build a tiny home for. I warranty the home for a year. I have a 10-year structural warranty that a home warranty company provides. And then under my warranties, it lists each of my subcontractors, such as TrailerMade, who provides the trailer, my plumber, my electrician, my window manufacturer, as the warranties apply to them. So each person, each entity is identified to my clients very clearly, so they know who covers what part of the warranty. I hope that answers the question. So furthermore, I've probably seen over 150 different builders of tiny homes over the years that I've been building. And I will say, it's my opinion that most of them really don't give a damn about weight distribution, unfortunately, and they pay the price later. Some of us think about that, but I've seen people just do stupid things with so much weight on either end. You know, we, at Simplicity, we try to put most all the weight on the axles and a little bit more to the aft rather than too much to the front. And yes, I have put concrete bags and pavers in the front of my trailer twice because I towed it to a show and go, oh my God, 25 miles an hour down the interstate because there's so much hula going on. So there's ways of dealing with that. I think it's not really important, in my opinion, for the TAC team to really deal with proper weight distribution. It's more about the structural integrity of the house that's being built upon it, because the towing is a very small part of it. The living in the home for years to come is the major part, which I feel would be better served with interest of the group.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank
Tim?
you.
Tim Pate? Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, sorry, thanks. Couple of comments. I know the part of this real recent discussion was warranty of the trailer, warranty of various components of the tiny home. And I just want to point out to everybody, I get this question quite often from homeowners with, you know, issues with their builders. And this is not for a tiny home, but for just regular builders, production builders or whatever. And the building codes, IRC or the IVC, they don't talk about warranty anywhere. So we don't enforce anything, have anything to do with enforcement of warranties. Now, most products do have warranties, roofing or trailers. So I just want to keep that in perspective from Division of Housing and the code. We don't do anything with warranties. And then my second comment would be the chassis, or the trailer, I should say, which is like a chassis. It becomes part of the permanent structure, I guess is permanent until they move it. And the concept is, or the requirement is, I should say, is you got to transfer the loads from the structure down to the earth, so to speak. So it's typically, we chase point loads for the wind requirements and gravity loads all the way down through to the foundation, which is, in this case, is going to go through this trailer / chassis. So that's where I see it'd be important to know that the trailer / chassis is designed adequately to handle both those loads, not only for uplift, but gravity and for lateral loading. So to me, engineering of that would need to be done. And then I got a question. I mean, from a mobile home standpoint, that's a HUD mobile home. They have chassis, and I don't have never really looked up who inspects. I'll get that question. You know, who's inspecting a HUD unit, and why do they always blow down more faster in a tornado than a wind event? So they must have some standards for the chassis for the mobile homes. So those are a couple of comments, and then I guess a couple of questions.
Thank you, Tim. Justin?
Yeah, I agree with what Byron said. As far as the transportation, that's DOT's realm. There's no codes or standards for us as structural engineers to design for. I mean, there's AASHTO, and I'm not going to say that I have not checked frames for transportation. I have, but it's rare. And that's only at the request of the manufacturer. Usually it's the manufacturer's responsibility to provide their product to the site. And I always tell the manufacturer, I'm not doing the trailer design for transportation. That's on you. That's your responsibility. A lot of manufacturers they'll rely on the frame manufacturer. They'll rely on their expertise, their experience to do that. But sometimes they just don't know. So they'll have me check something. My background's mostly in commercial modular, not residential. So in commercial, we engineer everything. I don't do any prescriptive work. So I do frames. Ohio requires all of their frames to be sealed. but that is not for transportation purposes. That's to guarantee that the materials that they're using are correct, that they're called out correctly, and the welds, so that when I engineer the on-site condition, then I can check that for the proper support points and the live loads and all the additional loads.
Yep.
So anything prior to being on site, I don't know that that should be in our scope of review.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, I think we need to have some, when the construction plans come through, we need to know how that chassis is built. And I'm willing to consider other wording other than engineer stamp drawings.
Yeah, I agree. We can require something on the frame, but to say that it's engineer sealed for transportation purposes, that's what I have a.
No, yeah, and that, correct. And so Mike, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This is Mike Schmidt here in Colorado Springs. It seems to me that we're still attempting to permanently affix the tiny house to the trailer and call it the permanent foundation, and not allowing for any other transferable, in italics, foundations as a permanent subframe that the tiny house could be built on, i.e. Appendix A. You could build a tiny house onto a subframe in Appendix A because that subframe would eventually land onto a permanent foundation. With this approach, it would be possible to drop or attach the tiny house to a specially designed trailer that would be able to receive the tiny house subframe and secure it for either long-term use, like a tow, or using the trailer for transportation to a location where the tiny house could be lifted off the trailer and dropped onto a ground-based foundation. Using this model would be possible for the tiny house to be able to be installed or received into a ground-based subframe for long-term permanent placement, like an ADU, or in local jurisdictions where tiny house on foundation is the local code. This way, the owner would be able to have a tiny house that could be used for either one. And this would also address, some of the concerns that people have had about the weight loading, because you could design the tiny house onto a specially designed subframe and then be able to pass all those loads down into either the trailer or into a permanent subframe. So I don't know if we're kind of boxing ourselves in by affixing the tiny house to the trailer exclusively, but by being able to utilize a very unique form of subframe that can be transferred between the two.
All right, thanks, Mike. Mauro, give me just a second. I'm looking at the registry at the legislation on the definition of a tiny home. And I believe that a tiny home was required by the bill to be built on a chassis. And I thought we were going forward with, yes, here it is. A tiny home, and so tiny houses are still going to be allowed by Appendix Q, Mike Schmidt. That's what we would still allow for. If they want to come off the chassis, then it's really has to meet the tiny house definition.
Well, and again, what would happen there, Sam, is that the tiny house in Appendix Q could be built on a well-designed chassis or subframe, and then that subframe could be dropped onto a permanent foundation.
Correct.
Right? That's
Absolutely.
one model. Now, the other model is, instead of having to remove that sub chassis from the Appendix Q tiny house and put it onto and affix it permanently on the trailer, you leave the subframe on the tiny house and then allow it to be dropped onto a trailer where it can be securely fixed for transportation purposes from point A to point B, or as a long-term tow. So the idea is you're meeting all of the requirements of a permanent foundation. You're just basically adding a transferable subframe underneath the tiny house initially, which then allows it to be utilized in both cases. Now you've got the ability to address your engineered frame concept. Everybody says, hey, we want to have an engineered frame or an engineered chassis. There you go. You've got it. You built it underneath the tiny house. The only difference now is that engineered frame can now be designed to be dropped into a DOT certified trailer which would allow that frame to be received like almost like containerized cargo, but we're doing it containerized housing. That's the approach. So it meets all your engineered design requirements, but it allows it to be flexibly used between a tow or a permanently designed house.
Okay, I'm just looking at the definition in legislation that says a tiny home means a structure that is permanently constructed on a vehicle chassis. And so that's what we're trying to do right here. Mike Morrow?
Yeah, I think somebody already kind of hit on it. Whoever remember, I think it was maybe Justin or somebody, but the requirement here, just to be clear, like in a HUD home, or I think Sean had asked about RVs, in the end, the structural design we're talking about here, right, is just the end structure and how the loads of I guess I'd say from a design approval standpoint, it's the structure of the home and the chassis and the complete structure and how that attaches down into the foundation. The road travel and transportation is, at least right now in RVs and mobile homes, that's sort of handled, regulated by the Department of Transportation and localized, and it's a responsibility of whoever's hauling it. So structurally, the chassis itself and the design and the structure of that is all wrapped into the design approval for a structure that happens to have essentially a steel frame and a chassis as a part of it. So it's all about how the structural load points move down through there. So typically, a lot of times I would see that the entire structure might have a professionally engineered stamp, and like in our case, a third party approval that does the design approval on it may sign off on it. Requiring it for individual components of the total structure, that probably wouldn't make sense. But I guess it's, outside of industry, like I said, in RVs, you're talking about just the entire structure and the structural design of how all that works together.
Yeah, that's the RBIA standard, and we're happy, that's an accepted standard in the marketplace. And, we are not drawing any distinctions against that. We're saying that we're trying to create a new form of housing, affordable housing, that can be interchangeable between those two modalities. And it seems to me that, if a proposed standard for a sub chassis or transferable chassis design based on the base of the house that can be transferred to a uniquely designed trailer could just be another option in the market, whether Colorado adopts it or not. Other states may see that, or other jurisdictions may see that. It could be a best practice standard or a voluntary consensus standard that could be proposed in the marketplace. And again, this is some of the work that we're doing at the ASTM International Subcommittee under EO6, is we're actually proposing some of these unique standards. We just wanted Colorado to be open to the idea of being able to accommodate not only Appendix Q right out of the gate with the subframe, but be able to accommodate it into a transportable trailer design. So I think I've made my point. I don't want to belabor it and slow down the meeting, but I just think it's worthy of consideration.
All right, thank you, Mike and Mike. Now I'm going to go to Tracy, and then I'm going to go to Austin. It'll be interesting to see if there's what they've got to say. Tracy?
Can I just close up? Let's start with Austin, if you don't mind, Sam, and then
Fine.
I appreciate you.
Austin, she's passed the football to you.
Good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing? All right, so I am gonna be that guy, probably just for a split second. Let me get her to turn her phone down. So basically, I come at this from a little bit of a different perspective than some of the folks. I think that weight distribution is, I don't know if there's anything more important when you're talking about a house, the weight of the house on a chassis. It's probably one of the most critical things. So I keep hearing you guys talk about these trailers and, what is permanent, what's engineered. At the end of the day, can the trailer support the weight of the home that's sitting on it? I mean, that's really, really important. Right. I've probably built on 4 or 5 different trailers. I've actually seen a trailer buckle under weight. I've seen what happens. So is that a permanent foundation? Probably not, because it's not meant, it wasn't designed to support the weight of the home. Like, here's an example. I built a lot of houses that are 24 foot. The reason is people want to be able to move them around, hook them up to a vehicle, park them for a while, possibly sell them in the future. So this 24-foot house usually sits on a trailer that can support about 14,000 pounds. I would tell you the way we build 2x4 framing with lofts, rafters, at the end of the day, the amenities in the home, most of these houses weigh around 12,000 pounds. I've probably touched about 450 houses in my time of doing this. I've been around about 8-10 years, so not a terribly long time. I have seen what happens when you do not focus on weight distribution and somebody is moving the home around. I've actually seen customers on 2 occasions bring their homes back because they couldn't tow them down the road. So it wasn't necessarily my company, but it was somebody I worked for, and you learn a lot seeing that. So there's a fantastic video out there, homework assignment, whatever. It's on YouTube. It shows somebody put a skateboard on a treadmill, and it shows what happens when you add weight to the front of the skateboard and what happens when you put weight on the back of the skateboard. Most of the time, if you're working with a trailer company who knows what they're doing, their axles are set at a 60-40 ratio anyways. It's a necessity when you're dealing with this type of weight. Now, it's not a manufacturer home weight. You're right. It's not that 60,000 pounds, but you don't have your average person sitting in a truck pulling that house around. Now, I know this conversation's wrapped around people basically, affordable living, people living in these homes. But if you think into the future a little bit, sometimes someone's going to sell their home. I mean, out of all the homes I've built, I can say there's a good chunk of them where somebody, 3-5 years down the road, they sell the house. That means someone's going to come hook up to it, take it off the property, and there's a chance they could drive it 2 or 3 states away. So weight distribution is key if this house is going to stay on the trailer. Now, I've also been down the road of people talking about building a house that can come off of the trailer. I don't know how that would be. I don't know how that's permanent, really. In all honesty, you've got your subfloor that's got to be attached. That's part of the framing. And you've got your plumbing and maybe not electrical. Electrical can go at the house because it is a plug, but your plumbing, you run into a lot of issues if you don't permanently build the house on the chassis to stay on the chassis. So to remove it really kind of jeopardizes the structure. You would have to go around, that's just, I've built both ways and I've seen the repercussions of it. So long story short, all I'm getting at is we're talking about a permanent foundation. At the end of the day, can the trailer support the weight? Is it welded, designed to support that type of weight? And then weight distribution is everything if you are going to be taking this trailer and driving it down the road, whether it's a state away, whether it's 3 hours down the road. That's just kind of my 2 cents.
Thank you, Austin. Tracy?
I'm just going to say that I believe tiny house builders are accountable for designing a proper home with proper weight distribution. From a liability perspective, you have some tiny home builders that do not deliver their own homes because you do have to have proper licensing according to Department of Transportation. So a lot of times I heard, some other folks say, oh, well, tiny house builders, some of them deliver their homes, some of them pay for professional transport. Well, with the way the install process is going to work in the state of Colorado, you have to be a professional installer. So, there's got to be some formality with this, right? And there's some liability that goes with all of this as well. So when it comes to talking about the trailers, they've got to be built for purpose to be able to withstand the weight. I think it's fair to require the trailer specs. Maybe you don't want my plans that have an engineering stamp, but maybe the trailer specs for every tiny house build need to be submitted with their plans. That would be my assumption.
And how would you define trailer specifications, Tracy? To put you on
Well,
the spot.
yeah, that's okay. So we have 2D CAD designs and most trailer fabrication companies that give to the customers that purchase so they know exactly what they're purchasing. So I was going to provide to all of you guys, matter of fact, I'll upload it and send it to you today, Sam. I'll send you guys a 24-foot tiny house trailer that I built on at Tiny Building Experts that happens to have an engineering stamp, and I'll show you one that doesn't, but it's the exact same trailer. All the specs are written out, Sam, so any engineer could look at that trailer and see all tube steel. The engineered the fenders are engineered, they're structural, so you can actually see the specs of how it was built. You'll be able to see that the cross members are 16 on center, that they are flush, all of that stuff. So I will send you guys a trailer specs.
Okay, thank you. Sean, I think we're back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I know we got to kind of move forward on stuff, and I think the engineering of the trailer itself without a structure is not as big of a thing to deal with. And the DOT is going to tell, you know, if a trailer's fishtailing or if there's a load issues or something else, DOT is going to regulate that. They're going to stop them. They're going to ticket them. They're going to do whatever. But I do agree with Tim, Mike, I think Justin, and a few other people that we really need to focus on how, you know, have an engineer show how this, whatever chassis is being used can be, how the load bearing and things like that have to take place, and how the connection to the home itself for wind loads and things like that are done. And I think that's probably where we should focus most of our time. And anybody can let me know if they disagree.
No, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Mike, did you want to have one final comment before I jump back into going through the slides?
Well, I think that the trailer industry, there's a number of different types of sliding subframes for trailers that have been around for decades. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from the transportation industry that's done a lot of transfer of heavy loads on and off of trailers in an industry. And I think that there's a lot of really good predicate that's been developed in that area. So we hope to kind of expand on that in the ASTM International group. So we'll come back to this body with some recommendations as we move through our process. Thanks.
Thank you. Austin, you have a final comment, or is your hand just up from the previous time?
Well, the hand was up on accident, but I do have a final comment.
Okay.
And I see where Mike's coming from. I've been down this road as well. I was out to Pueblo to try to help a guy bring in these trailers that you can pull the houses on. Again, you get into the problem of DOT. DOT is a big deal. We're not trying to raise attention and make it look like, you know, we're just trying to get away with murder. But at the end of the day, you have a height restriction. 13.6 is 13.6. So a lot of times when you're building a house to size 13 foot plus, and then you go put it on a 2-foot trailer, you run into a lot of issues. So I like where the conversation's going. I appreciate what work you guys are putting into this. But yeah, there's a lot that goes on into building these homes. And I agree with some people here that there are companies out there that don't give a crap, but I just want you guys to know there are companies out here that do care. And we're hoping that you guys do see that.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll tweak the definitions here a little bit. And what I'd like to do now is just jump back over and share my screen and keep running through this PowerPoint. All right, so those were the only definitional changes that we really looked at as far as tiny homes. Then we start talking about codes and standards, right? Rule number 2. We've already talked about sticking with IBC 2018 as previously amended. Tiny homes will follow IRC 2018. The only thing that I'm going to have to do in IBC is look at transitional housing, and that's where it's just the housing itself with community showers and community baths, and those will need to be built to IBC 2018, but we're not quite there yet to have that TAC discussion on that. Then the second one is B in this PowerPoint is IRC 2018 is amended, and that's amending Appendix Q. Appendix Q was already previously adopted in the last set of rules. And then sticking with IMC 2018 as amended, IPC 2018 is amended. National Electrical Code is published by NFPA. I think we're on the 2020 edition. I know there's some talking about changing that. And then fuel gas 2018 and IEC 2015. And I've got some changes proposed that have come in from the group on that. So here's in the IBC 2018 where I talk a little bit about that transitional housing communities, which may be utilized by a person for up to 2 years, and are an arrangement of sleeping units with community rooms such as kitchens, showers, and meeting rooms. This may go into the definitions. So if you guys, and we don't have to discuss it today, but if you have thoughts on this, please send me an email with any thoughts you have on this one. All right, then IRC 2018 amended and Appendix Q edits. What I tried to do on this was bring in as much Appendix AQ stuff from 2021 over, and I hope it kind of makes sense. But so in 101.1, the scope would change to read, this appendix shall be applicable to tiny houses and tiny homes as defined by 2432, used as single dwelling units. Tiny houses and tiny homes as defined by section blah shall comply with this code except as otherwise stated in this appendix. And then insert and tiny homes after every reference to tiny houses in all sections of this appendix. And then in general, 102.1 added tiny home as defined by section 2432, 3302, and the square footage of a tiny home excludes loft area. Does that make sense to everybody? Justin?
I might be jumping the gun, but in your list of codes, I didn't see an IEBC, an existing building code.
Okay.
What's going to happen if somebody wants to move in a tiny home from another state?
Right.
Or within the state?
And which code is that? Help me out. It's not one we've previously adopted.
It's the International Existing Building Code, the IEBC.
Okay, thank you. I'll have to take a look at that. Is anybody else familiar with that code? Okay, we'll take a look at that. Thank you, Justin. Margarita?
No, so that code basically, if the house is super old, as Austin said, that you're gonna sell it within maybe 4 or 5 years from today, the house should be, just put up to code, up to the code that it will be existing at the time of the seller, if he wants to he or she wants to renovate or change anything. But that depends, is a percentage of those renovations that will go into that will go and trigger that existing code. So I don't know if it is important to have that code, just as part of our tiny homes regulation right now. That I'll leave it to Tracy or to Byron.
Okay, thank you. Eric, you had a comment?
Yeah, I agree with Margarita. I'm not sure it applies because Division of Housing is dealing with new construction, prefab construction offsite, brought to a site, how it's installed, how it's sold. After that point, I'm not sure how much you still have jurisdiction. We deal with the International Existing Building Code all the time for additions, alterations, change of occupancy, etc. But once the home is sited somewhere, I'm not sure, this is new territory. And then they're going to pick it up and move it. Does it just fall to the local building division? They would know that it had previously been built, to what codes it had been approved by the local authority having jurisdiction. But then there's those areas where there's no building department and you guys have jurisdiction over it. So You know, maybe you need the IEBC as a fail-safe, but I don't think you've used it before.
I don't think we have either, and so my concern would be on the situation where Justin said we've got a tiny home built in Kansas, comes in and wants to be installed. Does it follow our installation instructions? And how do we verify that it's you know, the unit that bounces out from the mountains in Colorado in the summer to Tucson in the winter, you know, how do we handle that? So we'll have to think through that. There's probably a way to write a rule. I think we would, but let's take a look at that and see. And I respect what you just said, Eric, regarding jurisdiction. I know that in our modular rules that if a home is modified after it's installed, that's up to local jurisdiction. Sean?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I don't know that the state wants to get into regulating used homes. I think that's definitely up to a local jurisdiction and kind of outside what you're trying to do here with new structures and certified structures.
Yeah. On Austin, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I do. So it sounds like this won't be an issue if you're building in the state of Colorado because you guys are defining this code. It sounds like the issue would be is if a house comes from out of state, an existing home from out of state. An example is there's times we build houses that go to different states, Wyoming as an example, and they have certain requirements on snow load and certain pitches of roof. So it'd be like a house coming from Tennessee that has no snow load or R value coming out to Colorado. Does it pose an issue when somebody wants to park that house into a certain jurisdiction? You know, do they have to get it up to code in order to park it there?
I think they do. I think most local jurisdictions would say when they applied for the building permit or the permit through the county or the city or the town, and is that, you know, it's got to be designed to the right wind, snow, and thermal loads.
So like that would be that code we're talking about, the the existing home, you know, does that come into play now?
Yeah. All right. So I must have said something. I saw a bunch more hands jump up. Margarita?
No, I just wanted to mention that it will be cheaper actually to build a new house than adapt a house coming from Tennessee into, you know, a code that fits our code here in Colorado. It makes no sense from my point of view.
Right. John Meyer?
Yeah, I think Sean hit it. New homes, that's what we're after here. And anything new is going to be built to the current codes. Anything existing that needs to be moved in, you still have to apply for a local permit, and that local jurisdiction would make sure that meets their local code.
Right. And for the counties that don't have, or the jurisdictions that don't have building departments, I guess it would fall on the state to look at the wind and snow load design for that unit.
Yeah, they would. And then it seems, and maybe Nate could back me up on this, on the modular side, if it was built in Colorado, then you have a record of that home previously built, and you cannot, if it's built to code today, 10 years from now, you can't adjust and say it doesn't meet code. It did. So again, it's still, it might fall on the state, but you're still going to have a record of that home that was built in Colorado. If it's out of state, you look at it and they have a record from a tiny home built in 2012, you're going to know that it currently doesn't meet code potentially. But yeah, it would have to be submitted to the state.
Thank you. Justin?
I agree with Sean that, yeah, the locals could probably handle it, but that puts a huge burden on the consumer. It's more complicated than if we give them an avenue to say, yeah, this was approved already. I, as a structural engineer, have sealed things on the IUBC and said it worked back here when this was designed. There's been no structural changes. These are the new design loads at this location, which are less than or equal to the existing design loads, and then we're done with it. But to get locals involved, they may want to do inspections. And then how do you do that after everything's been built?
Thank you. And so we are running into also some, from my perspective, we get calls on a regular basis with people that have, that think their tiny house is permanent. And it's not, and we haven't even put into effect this law yet. So we're gonna have to deal with some of those things, and it's just gonna be tough. All right, I think I got almost everybody's comments up. Robin, did you have anything else? Your hand is up.
Yes, if you don't mind. Two things that we do that might enter into the conversation here. And number one, a data plate that spells out some of the, what codes and standards and R values and things like that the home was built to. And second, we also digitize and store all inspections, framing, rough trades, and they are made available going all the way back to the beginning of when we started doing inspections. So they would be, if it was something that we did and inspected, those files would be made available to the local building officials.
Great, thank you for that. Byron Fears, did you have something?
I do have something to share. I'm getting very confused with what we're speaking about right now. I thought from the beginning of this whole bill, it was to create a standard that all builders had to build to for all tiny homes coming into our state. So we all need, it's unfair burden on the Colorado builders that it would even be considered that a home could be brought in from out of state that was not built to this criteria. So I don't really understand we're going around in circles right here, it seems, and I don't understand.
No, Byron, I respect your point. And here's my concern is that we can control the manufacturer and the sellers and the installers of tiny homes coming into Colorado. That's easy to do from this point forward, right? But when the consumer that bought a tiny house in Arizona, that was an Arizona manufacturer, and he sets it for a year in Arizona and then wants to bring it up here and set it for a year up here, that's where you get into a local building permit and a local government situation, in my opinion. So we're really talking about the responsibility of the consumer to work with their local building department, and I'm not sure we can regulate that, and so that goes to your point too, as part of these rules and regulations. Right?
Kind of, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of.
Thank you.
I won't belabor it.
Did I get everybody's? I still see Tim's hand up, and I still see Robin's hands up. Did you guys have anything else to add?
Sorry, I forgot to lower.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I thank you. This is Tim Pate. The comment on the like the label that would be affixed similar to what my jurisdictions are required to take a look for say a modular factory built that's put on a permanent foundation, whether it's residential or commercial. We would always be looking for that as part of our final to verify the snow and the wind loads for our jurisdiction, which I would assume this is going to be all into play with the tiny home that would also be required to have that label. That's the question. Thanks.
Okay, and then the other aspect I just thought of was too would be the custom built stuff, the owner built stuff that is coming from out of state too. All right. Any other questions? Let's jump back. You guys are still looking at my screen on these first two change. There's quite a few in here. If you do, send them to me. Let me see if I can get this to advance. Here we go. And I know we've got discussion on coming up on some of these. Loft access and egress, we spent some time on that in the first couple meetings. Q104.2, the access to and primary egress from loft shall be of any type described in sections 104.2.1 through 104.2.5. The loft access and egress element along its required minimum width shall meet the loft where its ceiling height is not less than 3 feet. And this was direct language out of Appendix AQ. And then the other one, and I'm going to look at this slide and then we'll jump back and if anybody raises their hand. Stairways, edit Q104.2.1 to read stairways accessing lofts shall comply with this code or sections Q104.2.1.1 through 7. And then it talks about headroom. Again, this is wording from the IRC AQ 2021 version, I think. Any questions or concerns on those? I see one hand up. Austin? Robin, sorry. Either one of you. Hands are popping up every place.
Robin, you can go, or I'll go. All right, so question about the 36 inches in the loft. Easy to achieve. I'm imagining that height is coming from possibly trying to fixate size and height down low for egress. But I see that you're just excluding loft as a square footage. So
Yes.
A couple questions, but I won't ask them now. At the end of the day, 36 inches isn't adequate for if you're trying to put an egress in a sleeping loft. You have usually an 8-inch mattress, which is in the way of the window. So it's blocking your window. And then in no way does it leave room to put a header or anything above the windows. So just curious on that 36 inches, I guess, where did that come from? Or is that something that's just set in stone going forward?
Well, nothing's set in stone. It's up to this group to determine what exemptions they want to make in Appendix Q.
Roger. Yeah,
I think, Austin, that 36 inches came from, and it goes down to 12 inches depending upon the pitch of the roof. How do you measure your 35 square feet? And so that's where that was. But I wanted to, mention number one, yeah, you can put a skylight in to meet all the egress requirements of IRC. I had an idea. I don't know whether it would work or not, but we're going to talk about landings here in a minute, and the size of the landing going up into the loft. And the thought was that if that egress window could be on the landing, as the landing's made part of the loft, then a much larger egress window could be put in there, because there would obviously be 6 foot 2 inches to deal with rather than 36 inches when you're dealing with the sidewalls of the loft.
Right, and I think that's a great solution, because normally to hit your rise and run anyways on your stairs, you have to have some form of landing. Whether you have it down low or up high, obviously it makes sense to kind of have it midway, but usually in order to meet the rise and run requirements for stairs, I mean, I can think off the top of my head, I honestly think there's no way to do it without, based off of the height of the loft, right? There's no way to really achieve that without having some form of landing. I've just seen in the past where people build these short lofts, they stick these 8-inch mattresses that block half the window. And it's just, it's as a consumer, you want to help them, not hinder them. So.
Okay, thank you. Byron?
Yes, thank you. Is this 6 foot 2 in the third section here, the 6 foot 2? Is that to be from a landing at the loft? you would have to have over a 3-foot step as your last step if that's the case. It's, I don't think there's enough clarity in this statement. And what's the 6'2"? Where's that come from?
Appendix AQ in 2021 IRC.
Okay, but there's no way to really achieve, you can't stand at the top of the steps and have 6'2" of clearance and make the last step into the loft.
So just 2 cents on that one is like, typically you're 3 steps up, boom, you have a landing, and then it's 4 more steps up to the loft from that landing. So usually it requires like an L-shaped kind of set of stairs. You know what I mean? Where you walk towards the wall at 3 steps, so you have a landing, and then you turn your direction and you walk up another 4 steps. I mean, that's usually what situation we run into whenever we're trying to beat code on the rise and run. It's just, there's no way to achieve that rise and run without doing some form of landing, because you've got to correct your steps somehow. And that's just the experience I've run into doing it.
Yeah, I always put a landing at the top of the stairs, so there's more room to move around and get your footing rather than the middle.
Roger. And that's a convenient part, right? When you're scooting out of the
Right.
loft, you have somewhere to kind of set your feet to stand up. But in order for the rise and run, what is it like 9 1/4 and 7 1/4 or something like that? It's in order to meet that height, depending on the height of your loft, like, you know what I mean? The only way you're really meeting those numbers is with some form of landing somewhere midway anyways.
I believe Appendix Q allows for different size risers.
Yes,
Am I
it does.
correct?
The max you can do, from what I understand, is a 12-inch rise, and the minimum is a 7-inch run. So, obviously that's not with the IRC. It was adjusted, and you can also use ladders. You can use alternating treads. There's all of that in Appendix Q for accessing the loft. But usually the 6'2" is a problematic because, and I sent in earlier to the TAC group my calculations based on the lowest trailer height, which is 22 inches for a drop axle, and the maximum height of a unit, which would be 13.6. And the shortest ceiling that you can have over a kitchen and a bath being 6'4", that there is no way to make it work with this landing being required to be 16 to 18 inches from the top of the loft to the landing and still maintain that 6'2" height. So my recommendation would either be make it 24 inches to the top, from the top of the landing to the loft, or make that 6'2" requirement less, because by the time you're on the landing, you're already crawling into the loft and bent over. So maybe that 6'2" number could be adjusted. But numerically, it just does not work with a 22-inch. And then if you get a higher one, which doesn't have a drop axle, it'll be 26-inch to the top of the trailer. So just my little input there.
Thank you. Brad, do you have a comment?
Yes, 3 things. The 3 feet in that first bullet has 2 purposes. One is to help measure the livable square area of the loft as defined in Appendix AQ. The other is to provide sufficient clearance for a body to pass through the opening from the landing into the loft. So that where the loft meets the landing riser, you want to have a 3-foot vertical opening there, at least. That's the purpose of that 3 feet. The second thing is what Robin alluded to just a moment ago. You either need to decrease the headroom requirement above the landing, or increase the range of allowable riser heights. I will tell you that the submission for the modifications to Appendix Q that resulted in Appendix AQ was intended to use the range 16 to 26 inches. So for the riser height, that takes care of that additional stack up there. And unfortunately, that portion of our submission was submitted and approved at 16 to 18 inches. That was a clerical error that would have prevented that problem with stack up for materials to result in an overall height of the structure to be less than 13'6". So strong recommendation is to increase the allowable range of riser height to be 16 to 26 inches rather than 16 to 18 inches. I think that takes care of all of the headroom issues.
Okay. Thank you. I've got a couple other hands up. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Couple of comments on the question of like the not less than 3 feet, that et cetera. So there is another section that isn't on the slide, and it talks about lofts shall have a floor area of not less than 35 square feet. And then this goes with that if it's got a headroom height of less than 3 feet, you can't use that as part of that 35 foot. So that's a comment. And then it also talks about minimum dimensions. Loft shall not be less than 5 feet in any horizontal dimension. And then kind of the discussion on the 6'2" headroom height. And that's how you measure both from the top landing or intermediate landings or above, perpendicular or plumb up from the nosing. So that's a reduction from the straight code requirement for 6'8", which is down below. And that's in a different section, AQ 103.1. And I want to remind everybody that this appendix, the previous one, and then it turned into Q, that was a set of code requirements that was brought in by the tiny home lobby group community to get into the 2015. So they spent a lot of time and effort coming up with these numbers, the 6'2", how you can access the loft, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd really caution going down the path to start modifying the basic code language in this appendix, because I understand some of the concerns, but this was vetted throughout the country, international code, and the members, ICC membership reviewed and approved both the initial one and then some of the changes in the 2018 and the 21. So if we want to be coming out of the gate using the standard that's being adopted throughout the country and other parts of the world, I highly recommend that we stay with these specific numbers. That's just my comment.
Thanks, Tim. And unfortunately, I can't get all the changes on here. And you're right, some of these are clarified in a little bit later language. So maybe what I should do is just run through all the Appendix Q edits and then go back to the top and work our way down a little slower. That might be a clarification for some people. Sean?
Yeah, I've read, I don't know how many times I've read this edit on headroom, 6'2" inches. The standard stair height on a slope from the edge of the bull nose on the stair is 6'8". I just don't see how these numbers based upon this description can possibly work unless there's something in here that I'm just missing. I mean, almost the way this reads, your headroom height should be, because your slope is going to start at your loft and work down the stairs. So that number should almost be the same thing as what your required headroom height for the loft is. Maybe I'm looking at that wrong, but that's the way I'm reading it. So if somebody can give me better clarity, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I'm gonna go through the appendix Q edits, and then we can jump around and have individual discussions on the things. So this is Q01 04.1.3. This figure was in the AQ version that I brought over into the Q version. This talks about the 3-foot minimum ceiling height. It isn't counted until this is only the only portion of the loft that's counted. Again, I'm not a tiny home builder, so you guys are gonna have to work this out for me. And then landings, and again, I apologize, these are a little bit out of order. But hopefully the Word document that I sent is a little more correct. On landings, intermediate landings and landings at the bottom of the stairways shall comply with section R311.7.6, except that the depth and the direction of travel shall not be less than 24 inches. And then there's a whole section on landing platforms that was in the AQ one that I copied back into Q. The top tread and riser of the stairway accessing loft shall be constructed as a landing platform where the loft ceiling height is less than 6'2", where the stairway meets the loft. The landing platform shall be not less than 20 inches in width and in depth, measured horizontally from and perpendicular to the nosing of the landing platform. The landing platform riser height to the loft floor shall be not less than 16 inches and not greater than 18 inches. And then just some renumbering on handrails and stairway guards. There was also a change from AQ between Q and AQ to support a 300-pound load versus a 200-pound load. And then added on loft guards shall be located along the open sides of the lofts. Loft guards shall not be less than 36 inches in height or 1/2 of the clear height to the ceiling, whichever is left. Loft guards shall comply with R312.1.3 and table R301.5. And just for reference, this is probably how we're going to be going through these things in the future. So I'm going to do a better job of getting you guys out information to review prior to the meeting. Sending you stuff late Friday on a 3-day weekend. I know you guys haven't had a lot of time to review in detail. I spent with two screens and a Word document open trying to look at the codes and the changes live, and it was a struggle for me. I'm sure it was not having the codes open is something you guys may want to refer back to. Then the other one we can talk about air leakage testing. This is kind of ties in with some of that. Also 1.1 whole house mechanical ventilation. And alternative compliance. This talks about the energy code. And then adding Q107 for tiny homes. If the bathroom lavatory cannot be added due to size constraints, then the kitchen sink can be substituted to meet the lavatory requirement. And then 108 construction on a built for purpose trailer. This ties back to the definition discussion we just had. Trailers that have structural modifications prior to the start of the tiny home build must provide, and I called it engineered stamp drawings, and the documentation to be roadworthy in Colorado on Colorado roads. And then these are my parens that may not make it to the final rules, structural modifications may change the trailer classification to a kit trailer or a homemade trailer, and a new VIN, gross vehicle weight rating, and physical inspection by CDOT or Highway Patrol may be required. And then the addition of Q109, tiny home on a temporary foundation, a tiny home on wheels, which is installed on a temporary foundation, may utilize connections to an electrical pedestal or plumbing connections that allow for movement from one location to another. And that was all the Appendix Q edits. Now, let's go back. Where do we want to jump to? Any questions, concerns, statements on any? And let's do it page by page. Because we've got a lot of people and a lot of opinions. And and again, as you've had time to digest the discussions and time to digest the materials that I sent you, please send me back comments, and we'll, my next in a draft format that we can edit, instead of just a Word document talking about all the tiny home stuff. Then we can see all the rules together moving forward. So I see 3 attendees. So on this slide here, I see 3 attendee hands up, but I don't know who they are because my computer's being stupid. Anybody have questions or?
Yeah, could I jump in? This is Austin again. out in
Thank you,
Colorado
Austin.
Springs. I had my hand raised. Okay, so it all comes down to math. I want to just kind of go back to the loft and heights, and I'm just gonna shoot you straight. Normally I keep this a secret. I don't like to share this kind of stuff, you know, trying to stay competitive and whatever, but it all comes down to math. All right. Over the years of building tiny homes, we have to be able to build to meet code. And we did this 5, 6, 8 years ago because we knew this was going to become an issue. So at the end of the day, this is really what it comes down to. In order to meet egress height down below the loft, right? Assuming there's a loft above it, you're already locked into a certain number. And that number at the end of the day is 78 inches, 6'6". That's the max height you can achieve in order to achieve certain loft height to meet certain egress windows up there. So in order down below 78 inches allows you to have a 36-inch tall window, which means that window has to be at a certain height off of the decking in order for somebody to be able to actually get out of the window per code. That 300 pounds we're talking about, right? It needs whatever, you know, it needs to be able to sustain the weight of that. We've been down this road as well. And I guess at the end of the day, the question where it's left off is, do you count a toilet as something you can stand on? Do you count a countertop as something you can stand on to get out of the window? Or do we want to say that there can't be anything in front of that window in order to get out of? So in order to meet a certain egress window opening down below, there's a certain measurement for that. Usually it's 36 by 30, 36 by 36. That's a conversation that I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole on. What I'm getting at is that 78-inch number is locked in order for above the loft to be at 44 inches, in order for you to be able to truly put an egress window on the side. So a lot of times what happens is people don't leave enough room in the loft to put an egress window with a header. So they end up having to put an egress window on their gable ends. So that dictates where your loft is located. So I agree with Tim. I mean, I understand where Tim's coming from. You know, people put a lot of energy into the code. You know, there's committees that got together. But in my years in this industry, I've seen people come and go, and I've seen people come in and do things once or twice. I've seen people try to come into the industry and realize how hard it is to build in a tiny home. You're locked into a certain height period when you're building on a trailer. 85% of the trailers on the road, and correct me if I'm wrong, are 24 inches tall, period. And if they're using drop axles, they're not meeting, there's no way it's going to support the load of a house. They're going to fail. So I get nervous, and this is why I get nervous that sometimes I see people take the side of what's easier versus what's safety. And for me, that's what I'm hoping the focus is, because what I sure would hate to see in the future is we have a lot of safety concerns that come out of this, a lot of hazards and trip hazards. I mean, there's a reason for rise and run. Our bodies are accustomed to certain steps, and if those steps don't repeat themselves, people trip down the stairs. So basically, with a 78-inch loft, in order to meet egress below and egress above, per the stairs that we're talking about, that leaves your final step at 4 inches. So we've already created one tread that would be a different height than the rest. And the purpose of a rise and run is so the treads are equal in distance, because your body has a funny way of having muscle memory. So I forgive me for being so passionate about this, but the reason that I'm in this industry is because we want to make sure we're delivering a safe product for a consumer around the board. 16 to 20 inch rises. If somebody's got ADA issues, obviously they're not getting up into the loft. That really cuts out a good chunk of the, well, how do you say that? The consumer? Because not a lot of people are going to be able to rise their feet 20 inches in the air, 16 inches. But long story short, it all comes down to math. I mean, when you have 13'6" and you're 24 inches off the ground, you're locked in. That number's never going to change. And that's, in a sense, that's what makes building these simple. And there's only a few ways you can do it right. And meeting code along the way, you know what I mean, with headers and stuff like that.
Thank you, Austin. And that's one of the reasons the TAC is set up this way. We've got code officials, we've got builders, we've got other industry perspectives. It's not just the shortcuts. This is at the end of the day, we wanted to deliver to the State Housing Board for approval a set of rules that we think are that are going to be safe, right? And not shortcuts. Okay, I can't see, for some reason, I'm not even being able to see.
This is Robin. I have my hand up.
Okay, let me go to Tim first, and then Robin, I'll be back to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just a couple of comments about the headroom height again. So the code AQ 103 starts out saying the headroom height needs to be not less than 6'8", and then it does have the exception, so to speak, for bathrooms, toilet rooms, and kitchens can go down to 6'4". So in my understanding then, from a design standpoint, you could put your layout, your floor layout of the main level to comply, to be able to take whether it's the kitchen or the bathroom or the toilet room, and put that underneath the loft area. The code does say a minimum size loft, doesn't say a maximum size loft, so you could actually build the whole thing as a loft. But in that case, you'd have to get 6'8" in the other areas. So I just wanted to make that comment that from a design standpoint, a builder could make it work with the headroom height, and this is a different section than what you've got up there. So it can be done. You're not limiting things because you could just move the rooms down into the area that you can get the 6'4".
Okay, thanks, Tim. Robin?
Yeah, Tim, I wanted to make a comment on something you said earlier, which applied to what you just said. When the Appendix Q and the Appendix AQ were passed, they were passed not for wheels, but on foundation homes. And they don't have that 13'6" restriction that tiny houses on wheels have going across the highway. So even with the 6'4", with my calculations, it does not work to have that landing at 18 inches and still have the 6'2" ceiling height. But with that said, I wanted to say that when you're in a loft, you're not walking, you're crawling around. And when you come down to that landing, you're still in a crawl position. So theoretically, there could be the argument made that the landing that happens to be at the loft could be reduced from 6'2". And also, I just measured a bed that I have here, and that bed is 26 inches off the floor, and have no problem getting in and out of it. So that in essence, if you were at a landing and wanted to crawl into the loft, theoretically, if you could get into your 26-inch bed, you could get into that 26-inch loft with that distance there. And finally, just to address what Austin had said earlier, if you did decide that the landing at the top of the loft, or at the bottom of the loft there, right adjacent to the loft, if that particular landing could be incorporated as part of the loft, then that egress window would be no issue, no problem.
All right, so does anybody else have their hand up that I can't see? Unless I drop the slide. All right, let's go to the next. Oh, sorry. Get back here. Anything on this page, and we've talked landings quite a bit. Any other discussion on that? And this is more discussion on landing platforms. Loft guards and size and capacity. Okay, then we pulling the AQ. Let's talk about energy conservation for just a minute. Pulling the AQ stuff in 2021 over to Q, added a whole section on energy conservation. And so IRC has a whole chapter on energy conservation that in the past we have deleted because we're on IECC 2015. So I went back and tried to reference the right tables. So there is an air leaky and then the section on whole house mechanical ventilation is also in there. The other thing that I think I modified in the next slide was the requirement from an R49 to an R38. Let me see if I can find that one. Yeah, number 1 here, allowing ceiling insulation to be R38 versus R49. So I see some hands popping up on this energy conservation discussion. Byron, I see your hand up.
Thank you very much. R38 is way excessive. That means we would have to be doing 2x8 rafters, which basically it just doesn't work. It's 2x6 rafters I could be okay with, but even with the high altitude formula antimicrobial closed cell foam, you're only going to get at best R28 to R32. And we can't go to 8 or 10 inch rafters.
All right, so Byron, your recommendation is a 28 or a 32?
2x6 rafters is what I would recommend as being required at the largest. And so with that, you're getting maybe R35 possibly. But so R32 would be more reasonable. I'd like to see it smaller because there's people that aren't going to want to use the sprayed foam because they think it's bad for the environment. If you use the right ones, it's not. So there's not any other insulation material that's going to be able to reach that.
Okay, thank you. Austin, I'm gonna come back to you and I want to hear from Robbie next.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's the issue of tiny houses being small and using less energy anyway. But the reality is that the code is trying to govern the relative size, based off of the relative size. So I think that the insulation level can be less than what's required by the 2018 code, but I think going down, I guess I want to hear more about why a 2x8 rafter or putting foam on the outside of these structures or doing, alternative techniques can't be used in a tiny house. I mean, it doesn't seem to me that the building science of energy loss and condensation control and all these other things that the code is getting at with regards to insulation should just be thrown out because they're smaller houses. So if you're talking about reducing the R value in the wall, why not, for example, say R15 plus 5 exterior, so you have that condensation control on the first condensing surface. And in the same way on the roof application, if you're going to go to a 2x6 in the roof, then you should be putting something on the exterior to manage condensation and also increase continuous R value. So I just don't understand the idea that just because it hasn't been done this way, or because 2x8s aren't commonly used, we shouldn't consider that, I guess, ultimately.
Thank you, Robbie. I promise to go to Austin next, and then I'll come back to Sean and Tracy.
Okay, thanks, guys. So basically, an average home, 24-foot house, probably has 150 studs in it. All right. So when you go to throw a 2x6 roof on, you're adding, eye on the prize, weight distribution. You're creating something that could become top heavy, right? So that's one concern. Second concern is the R value in a 2x4 rafter, because most tiny homes have rafters. There's no attics. So I just want to kind of make that very clear. There is no attic space with air up there and stuff like that. It's usually rafters. The average home that we build, you can heat it in 8 to 10 minutes or cool it in 8 to 10 minutes, and it stays. That's using spray foam cell. So to go to 2x6 rafters, framing wise, it just kind of blows my mind just a little bit there, because even in a 2x4, which these houses weigh 12,000 pounds, right? So you start adding bigger studs, you start adding a lot more weight. Then you deal with an issue of your trailer being able to support the weight. But that's another thing down the road. It's the way we frame even 24 on center with 2x4s. You're still getting, it's 7 R value per inch of spray foam. So it comes down to math, right? These homes are small. We're not, they're not, 2,000 square feet or anything like that. You're talking 200 feet. So if you're not careful, the way you can already say you were overbuilding these homes. So for example, here's another thing. These homes, most of them, the way they're built, they have ridge beams. Okay. So there is no way to properly vent a ridge beam because they're rafters, right? So you're not able to vent anything out. So when I hear 2x8s, I mean, again, like, what are we spanning? We're spanning 8 feet, 8 foot across. So I guess for me, it's 7 R value per inch, right? In a tiny home that's about 200 square foot to 300 square foot, if it's, a bigger one, what is that? 7 times 3.5, that's 21, 24. Like I said, most of these homes with a mini split in them, 8 to 10 minutes, the home is heated and or cooled. So it's kind of like back to what Robin's saying. I guess I'm a little bit confused as to what a 2x8 is going to offer, or what is it going to do?
Okay, thanks, Austin. Let's go to Sean next.
Yeah, I thought we had talked about, and maybe that's someplace else, but we were going to be maybe looking at a res check as an option. And I think that would take into some of this moving of our, instead of being more specific, it would allow insulation and windows and everything else to tie into creating a insulation value.
And I have to show my ignorance here. I'm not real familiar with res check and how that works. Is that in lieu of the codes?
Well, I mean, that's what's done under IRC to meet the IECC codes. They can go a little bit less ceiling insulation, more wall insulation, more, better windows to make the overall thermal envelope efficient.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
Yes, team, if you guys could remind me who offered to do the res check with me on one of the units. If somebody volunteered to help me through that.
I
May I
did.
ask-
This is Robbie. I said if you got me a set of plans, I would do a res check on them.
Okay, Robbie, I'm gonna look for your email and I'm gonna connect with you. I want to do the res check with you. So folks, I've mentioned this before when it comes to the R value. We're not having issues meeting the R value on the floor or the walls. It's going to be the roof. So that's why we've asked for some considerations to get it lower to that R28, R30 value, because once we complete the res check, I think it's going to knock your guys' socks off to understand why me adding, a few more $1,000s worth of insulation starts to equate. It doesn't really equate to that R values. Once you start, I went and did some data recently and some education with some spray foam guys. And the data that they supplied me says, once you start adding certain thicknesses, you don't even get the R value at an R7 anymore. You're going to start going down in R value to more of a one-on-one. So I've got some of that data. And so, because I've really been trying to figure out this roof insulation issue, right? Again, no issue with walls or floor. The tiny houses can meet that as long as the builders are putting the minimum R value that they're supposed to. It's the roof.
Spray foam is usually.
So as long as we're spray foaming, I'll do this res check thing, but I'm hoping that will put some of this to rest, because anything over an R28 in the roof, R30 in the roof, it's not doing anything except for adding costs for the consumers.
And 2x4 framing.
And it's adding weight to the house as well.
2x4 framing won't let you.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy. Justin?
Yeah, I just copied and pasted a section from the IRC that allows the majority of the roof to go down to R30, and it has a area limitation of 500 square feet, and we are under 400 square feet. So perhaps this is something to look at.
Byron would like to speak also.
Byron, let me come to you in just a second.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Sean mentioned that we did discuss this actually 2 meetings ago, and we said we can do the performance path for the res check. I think I shared something with you, Sam. You want me to share it again? It seems you didn't get it, but the performance path basically will put us to achieve the IECC requirements. So I don't see why do we have to go with the R49 or R50 insulation for the roof. Now, somebody suggested to add insulation on top of the rafters. That will be a rigid insulation board, most probably. That is not super heavy, although, it adds, as Tracy mentioned, adds value to the house. So I think the performance path for the res check will be the most effective way to just keep value or home price down and achieve the IECC requirements that we need.
Okay, thank you. Byron?
Yes, to address what it was, Robbie, I think, was suggesting about condensation. I put fresh air exchangers in every one of my tiny homes, so condensation is not an issue. And it's an affordable thing to do for under $700. Want to point out that most tiny homes that are being built have gabled roofs. And so we're spanning a distance of 4 feet maximum, typically from one wall to the top of the gable. So a 2x4 rafter is more than adequate at either 24-inch or 16-inch on center. Going beyond that is not necessary, as Tracy and Austin and others have suggested, because we are sealing it up really tight. Going to 2x6s, I can understand possibly. And if I do a 10-foot wide, I use 2x6 rafters rather than 2x4 rafters. Going beyond 2x6 is just basically not feasible. It's just going to make our loft spaces smaller and smaller. And there's really not the need once you see that. We can also use like the zip system for sheathing that has the insulation on the exterior. That can happen, but we can't be building that up a whole lot because the width of our homes for DOT's regulations. And for the roof, we're losing the headroom in the loft if we start doing that, because we have to reduce the height of the overall structure to have an insulated panel on the roof. And thank you for letting me speak. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Byron. So did I still am not able to see attendees that have their hands up. Anybody else on the, oh, there's Donnie. Hey, Donnie. Donnie, did you have anything to add? Wait a minute.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you now.
Oh, okay. For some reason, it didn't give me the microphone option there. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I kind of jumped in here a little bit late, but if I remember correctly, I think the recommendation for the R38 was for the prescriptive method. So what everybody's saying about the performance, that would be totally fine as long as it met the res check. But I think at a minimum, if you were to do the prescriptive method, it'd be R38 R38 instead of the R49. So I don't think we would have to change anything there. Unless you were requesting we change the minimum prescriptive down. I don't think there would be any need for that if you're going to do the performance.
Thanks, Donnie.
Yeah.
Any of my other panelists, Robbie, I think you still have your hand up, or did you have additional?
Yeah, this is Ravi. So I just 2 questions. I think or couple things. I think the person that put section R402.2.2 ceilings without attic spaces in the chat is really onto something. So the code, if you don't have an attic space, you're allowed to go down to R30, and it's limited to 500 square feet. So you do have, a potential out there prescriptively if you're using the prescriptive R value table. The other thing I wanted to mention was, again, that people are saying we can't do this, but the only explanation for why we can't do this that I heard that makes sense to me is requirements from the Department of Transportation and potential width issues and height issues. And then there was also a mention that tiny houses, because they're small, they can heat up and cool down very quickly, but that really doesn't mean that the code still shouldn't govern the energy use of these structures. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was, again, kind of the building science that's wrapped into the R values and the move in the R value tables to include continuous exterior insulation, not only to get at a whole wall or roof R value assembly, but if you look at the linkage between the R value table and the vapor retarder requirements, It's all about controlling condensation on the first condensing surface and trying to ensure that moisture that gets into these roof and wall assemblies isn't going to cause long-term durability and potentially health and safety issues. So I think we need to be conscious about how we're not only managing energy, but how these assemblies are being built to promote the best long-term durability, which is one of the big intents of the energy code.
Thank you, Robbie. Any other comments on air exchange or energy conservation until we?
Yes, Byron would like to say something. Robbie, in reference to moisture getting in, I don't know about what Tracy and Austin are doing, but many of us builders are using the ZIP system for our sheathing, which is a waterproof vapor barrier that's keeping any moisture from coming in from the exterior whatsoever. And so I've never, in all the homes I've built, experienced any issue around that. My first house that I built was plywood sheathing, but the rest have been all with ZIP for almost 9 years now. So I think that's eliminating the pressure from moisture coming in.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
that is dealing with bulk water from the outside. We also have water vapor from the inside of these units, which is concentrated in the small areas. But I think the other thing is that, the code is governing everything for those great builders like you and the people on this call to other builders where we have absolutely no idea about how they go about actually doing their construction. So
Yeah, point well made. I agree. There's some of us that really do our best to do well, and there's some that I think still have a lot to learn, but maybe we might want to consider requiring a fresh air exchanger in each tiny home.
yes, and that's the whole house mechanical ventilation. That is Q 106.1.1.
All right, in the interest of time, I probably need to jump ahead to some other sections. If that's okay with the TAC members, you guys can send me comments. With the attendees, feel free to send me comments. But let's walk through some of this. I want to try to be respectful of everybody's time, okay? So with that said, we're down to the Q107, 108, and 109. These are the last ones that were added on based on discussions that we've had. The bathroom lavatory one, if you can't meet a bathroom sink due to size constraints, and the kitchen sink can be substituted, which means you don't have to put in a bathroom sink. If you do, it needs to meet IRC 2018 standards. The other one is the construction on a built for purpose trailer. We've talked about that one. And then the other one was the Q109 on a temporary foundation, talking about the connections for electrical and plumbing. Any comments on those?
I have a comment. Are you stating that you have to have an electrical pedestal then? Most people just run wires to an exterior outlet or get hardwired from a pole or from a home rather than having
I'm
a
not saying
pedestal.
they have to. Is this Byron? I'm sorry, I can't.
Yes, it is. It's Byron.
I know your voice, Byron. No, I'm saying they may utilize connections to an electrical pedestal. I'm not saying have to.
Okay, cool.
And then Donnie, you had comments?
Yeah, just real quick, the Q107, they're still required a bathroom lavatory, right? I think that's the intent? Is there still require the bathroom lavatory? It's just if they don't have the space, then they would be okay to use the kitchen sink.
Thank you. I think I tried to say that. If I said it wrong, Donna, give me some better language, or any of the attendees, if you have better language in there, let me know.
Well, I guess my question, that was the intent, right? That they're still required a bathroom lavatory, but if they don't have the room, we could just revise it, but I think that was the intent. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what you and I talked about. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? I see some attendee hands going up. Robin? Austin?
All right, I just wanted to comment on the built for purpose trailer. I think that, you know, if the trailer was originally built by a trailer manufacturer, I don't have any issues with it. They know what they're doing. The challenge that I would have is if somebody was trying to modify a trailer or take an RV trailer and build a tiny house on it, or something like that, then I can see where either engineering or some kind of plans review, something would be able to block that. So I would differentiate from a trailer that was built by a trailer manufacturer for the purpose of a tiny house from a trailer that was modified from its original use.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Austin, did you have something?
Yeah, from my experience, you can't get R value in the flooring of a camper trailer anyways. And there are some trailer companies out there where you can't actually get the R value in their flooring because it's not 6 inches in depth. So, I mean, it is specific, basically built for purpose trailer. You know what I mean? But the other part was out of all the homes I've built, I can't imagine ever having a house that couldn't have a sink in the bathroom. I mean, sanitary purposes, that's just a little interesting, but that's fine. The temporary home on a foundation, I get a little confused. I guess I just don't understand. And on the way the homes are built that are permanently on a trailer, your sanitary system's below the house and all your P-traps are above the house. There's no crawl space. So I guess that's part, I guess, a little bit of clarification, maybe. The tiny homes on a temporary foundation on wheels, which is installed on a temporary foundation, may utilize connections to an electrical pedestal, plumbing connections that allow for movement from one location to another. So I'm just a little confused in regards to how, when you build a house with the sanitary system completely underneath the home, you know what I mean? Like how would that be? How do you take that off and put it somewhere, I guess, on a permanent foundation? I'm just a little confused by that.
So this came from some comments on trying to make sure these were still movable units. And with the temporary foundation, and this would be units going from one temporary foundation to another temporary foundation. I don't have an RV. I don't know what those connections look like. And I don't know what the code calls for connections under the International Plumbing Code. So I'm going to need some help on that, guys. Is this a good thing? And nobody said, hey, Sam, that's a great thing, but change it this way. And that's fine. But let me know if we need to reword this somehow.
Well, we have a community down Colorado Springs where we basically provide stub outs. So it's still on a foundation. The trailer's still on a chassis, right? P-traps are still above house because at the end of the day, there's no crawl space. That's kind of what the issue is with these homes that are on chassis. You know, and when we had a house out there where they put the P-traps below the trailer and they froze. So the solution was we provide stub outs. But in that circumstance, you wouldn't be able to hook that up and drive down the road and go to an RV park, right? You have no sanitary system below it. Yes, it's just what I was getting at.
Okay. Thank you. All right, and then there was a comment in the chat about the question, Brad, your question, the need for Q107 at all. there was a distance requirement concern, I believe, from on a bathroom sink or bathroom lavatory due to space constraints. And there was discussion previously on, do we need to change the IRC code, or do we need to allow them to just state that their bathroom lavatory requirement is met by the kitchen sink? Did I capture that right, group?
I guess my question is, what's the nature of the space constraint that would force the need to abandon the need for the lavatory and the bathroom and move it to the kitchen?
And
I believe it was like clearances for the front of the lavatory that would prevent them to install it. Because if the bathroom was too small, and that's what the intent was, adding that section in there, because I think somebody had brought up that they had built units that had no bathroom sink because there wasn't enough clearance in there, and that they used the kitchen sink as the alternative. And if you look at the IRC, it actually tells you that in order to be a dwelling, it has to have, or a bathroom group, it has to have a lavatory. So each bathroom group should have a shower tub, or, tub or shower, a sink and a water closet. Or a lavatory and a water closet. But to get around that clearance issue, we added this section here that you can use the kitchen sink as an alternative if you were not able to meet that minimum clearance for the lavatory.
That still doesn't address my question: is what is the nature of the clearance conflict here? I don't understand that. I'm not saying I don't like the option of using that the kitchen sink as to double as the bathroom sink. What I'm saying is I don't understand what the clearance requirements are that were being violated that forces that as a necessary option.
Right. Donnie, was that a 30-inch clearance requirement, or was that a 24-inch?
It's the front clearance in front of the sink, is my understanding. That's what I was having the issue with.
And do you remember what
was it that, or was it the being able to build a bathroom group that fit the water closet, the shower or tub, and the lavatory? Oh no, I remember it was brought up in the past that they did have some units that they built that they were not able to put a lavatory, and that's why the kitchen was being used in those units.
Right. JW, did you have a comment on that? John McGee?
Yeah, just, the measure in the IRC, the minimum requirements are 15 inches from a sidewall for a lavatory, 21 inches in the front, and then 30 inches clearance space. Their toilets required to have 30, and then you have a minimum shower size of 30 by 30, 900 square inches. There's some alternatives for the showers. They could be a little smaller one direction, but then they have to be 1,300 square inches or something like that, if you're looking at the IRC minimum requirements.
Thank you.
Another thing I might mention too is anything that's moved and put on site in Colorado is required to be the connections to the manufactured home are required to be inspected by an inspector on site for any of the connections there, and requires a permit in the 39 counties that the plumbing board does. Then they have to have a certification on the home, like the Division of Housing. That's in statutory and also in the plumbing code. But like I said, that's with the lavatories aren't required to be in with the toilet, but they do. The IRC does require the lavatory to be there by the IRC.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, guys, I'm going to rock and roll through the rest of these slides, and we're going to wrap this thing up. I wish we'd gotten a little farther, but let's let's take comments for the next 3 or 4 days, and I'll try to turn out something early next week with changes. So looking at the rest of the codes, again, we talked about keeping them all the same, and we talked about some potential changes to IEC 2015. I'm going to take a look at some of those other tables as we talked about, and the attic space requirement. So we'll take a look at those things. Installation standards. This is another section, Rule 2, that we looked at. This one doesn't directly relate to tiny homes, but it does relate to the state statute to add or wildfire risk. I just threw it in here just to get you ready for it, but that is a new requirement. And then adding 212.2, tiny homes must be installed on a permanent or temporary foundation that have been approved through the local jurisdiction. And this is in that HB 22-1242 law. In areas where no building codes have been adopted, the foundation plans must be designed and stamped by a state of Colorado licensed engineer unless plans are approved by the division and in compliance with its adopted International Residential Code Foundation prescriptive requirements. 212.13, tiny homes must provide a certified weight ticket. This ties back to the whole trailer thing and what is the axle ratings, right? Tiny homes must provide a certified weight ticket showing that the total weight at completion of the tiny home does not exceed the trailer gross vehicle weight rating. I talked to a couple folks offline on that. They thought it would be a pretty good idea. If you don't like it, let me know. And then Rule 214.1 to read model homes and tiny homes. Rule 3 deals with fees, no changes in fees. We are going to be doing a fee survey. I'm required by statute to do that. We'll look at what local governments charge as well as government entities outside of Colorado.
Sam?
Yes.
This is Tim Pate.
Hey, Tim.
Could you back one slide?
I think I can.
Please.
Here?
Right there. So in 2.12, you've got that wildfire risk.
Yep.
I want to share a little bit more background for a lot of people because of what the state, there might be a piece of legislation that's going to actually get out of committee this time for what we call the WUI code, the Wildland Urban Interface Code.
Yep.
And how that may impact these types of structures going into anywhere in the state. But I also was curious how these manufacturers, the builders, deal with moving the structure into some of the local jurisdictions, such as Jeffco, Boulder County, things like that, that have the WUI code in place, which is the Wildland Urban Interface Code. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And so I don't know a lot about it, but I know a little bit about it. So this was in the last legislation. I assume they knew that we were going to be looking at wildfire risk. I assume anything that gets through law now, and specifically what we're looking at effective July 1, based on the last law, is that the local jurisdictions, very similar to what they're doing for snow loads and wind shear factors, is to put in wildfire risk. And so that can be met. It's a little, and there may be an overall state guideline on this or rules coming out, but it can be met in a number of ways. It can be met by defensible space, can be met by exterior sheathing material. And then I'm going to have to defer to somebody that is actually living and breathing that to talk about more on how that might affect.
Yeah, thanks. I'm pretty familiar with the WUI code, but not that we enforce it in Broomfield, but just with the Boulder County standards, and, you know, the basic summary is non-combustible exterior, potentially fire rated glazing windows if you were up in the front range in Boulder County, screens over soffits, non-combustible decks and things of that sort. So it's pretty restrictive plus defensible space. So what I understand is that on a state level, there was a piece of legislation last legislative cycle that was going to create like a state fire code group that would be able to determine what portions, if any, in a jurisdiction have to comply with the WUI code. And it didn't make it out of committee, but I understand from seeing some stuff come out from CML that they're going to make a run at that again. They might have already started that process. So just as a heads up, it'd probably be pretty good to follow that. Of course, I know the Division of Housing will be part of that, just like the Energy Code Group. Thank you.
Yep, we are talking with them about that. Again, time-wise, if it gets into this year's legislation, they've got to pull a committee together and adopt statewide codes. We're probably looking 2 years down the road, or a year and a half at least. So, and that's just Sam's opinion. Okay. So Rule 4 deals with some of the manufacturing requirements. We basically added 412.1. Here we go. We start talking about the trailer manufacturers again. We'll take a look at that. And then adding a sentence covering in 421.2. We're looking at different colors for the tiny home insignia. That'll document the manufacturer and design information. That'll be that data plate from the state. And then 421.2.4. That's just a change for stuff coming in out of state to be set here. Will require that green 2-inch by 2-inch inspection only insignia. So, and then Rule 5, sellers of manufactured homes. We'll just add tiny homes in there, and then installations. There is an exemption in statute regarding the exemption of homeowners to register as installers, and limits the frequency and number of installations allowed. So we'll reference that in the rules. And then enforcement, no changes seen specific to tiny homes. All right, it does look like we've got some more tiny home work to continue to figure out. As you know, we missed the January 3rd meeting, which we were going to look at the foundation and installation standards, inspections, training, and certification. We still have some of the certification and training stuff to take a look at. January 17th. Now we're expanding, and we didn't do it at this meeting, but this is where we need some catch up. Is looking at all structures, manufactured housing, tiny homes, now tiny houses, and modular on foundations, wildfire risk. We just talked about that a little bit. There was some big discussions way back about whether or not we wanted to do blower door testing, fire suppression, and alternative construction. And then January 31st, which I think is our next meeting. We'll talk also about responsibilities of the manufacturer, seller, and installer. There are new bond requirements for the manufacturers, and then some change in wording for the escrow requirements. And then my target is still by February 14th to do to have everything at least to have presented to you guys and start cleaning them up as far as getting out something to the public. So and again, working the draft rule mode for sure by February 28th, have you TAC recommendations to look at. And then a couple more meetings on those, as I've seen from this meeting in particular and the previous meetings. We still have a little bit of work to do. But this is our kind of our catch-up period between February 28th and March 28th. By March 28th, we have to have everything finalized at the TAC level. By March 31st, it's going to go to is our deadline to file. And then April, we'll be taking comments from the public, and May 9th, we'll do the rulemaking hearing before the State Housing Board. June 30th will be the effective date of those adopted permanent rules, and July 1st will be the effective date. And then just because of the holiday schedule, July 3rd looks like maybe the first business day to take stuff, but I'm not sure where the July 4th holiday falls on that. All right, any questions on those last few slides I ran through? Again, thank you for your time. If you have thoughts and you wake up in the middle of the night with tiny homes chasing you, or that could be just me, send me those comments and concerns and we'll try to get them all wrapped up. I see one attendee with a hand still up. Is that Robin? Is that you or? Okay.
Yeah, I forgot to lower it. Sorry, guys.
That's okay, Robin. I do truly appreciate everybody's time today. I think we made some progress. We still got a little work to do. Anybody else have any final words? Otherwise, we'll just wrap it up. Like I said, in the next meeting, we're going to be looking at all structures, foundations. We'll talk some more about the wildfire risk, in addition to the revision of the tiny home rules that we've talked about today. Yes, so Brad, you asked about the copy of everyone on the contents of the chat. If you got the last email from me, Brad, I sent the last 3 sets of chats as an attachment. If you're not on my email list, please send me your email and I will get you added to that. Any other closing comments, questions? Yes, you will get all that out, Brad. And like I said, more advanced notice of the meeting or attachments for the meetings prior to that January 31st. So my goal is to take, if you guys can give me everything that you've thought about or wanted to make sure that you get your wording in to me by the end of the week, I'll turn that around pretty quick next week and we can get it out there. Austin, surely to God, Tracy shares content with you, but I will add you to my list. And I'm just picking on you.
Because I told him that.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Let's wrap it up. And you guys have a great day and a great week. Let's stop the recording now. Jim, can you stop the recording for me, or do I need to do that?